The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent, including Olus Media.
Olus Media.
Attacking the podcast world. And based on the true legendary cult classic, Olus Media presents
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Did somebody mention biscuits?
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. They'll beat you, mash you, squish you, mash you, chew you up or run.
How bad is it?
Finish you off.
Also, I definitely don't feel fly again. I'm not talking like that, you wiener. What about the tomatoes?
Cinephiles, get ready for another saucy episode. It's the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes podcast. Our guest, Gordon Goodwin, here to spill the seeds on creating the soundtrack to our beloved tomato-tastic cult classic. Here to serve up all the stories is your host, Costa Dillon.
Hi, this is Costa Dillon, your host for the Killer Tomato podcast. And today I am so pleased to have with us Gordon Goodwin, one of the two composers for the original Attack of the Killer Tomatoes soundtrack, a multi-Grammy, multi-Emmy award-winning artist, of which I cannot claim we have myself any of those. I don't think I've even watched the Grammys. But we're certainly Gordon fits the mold, just like George Clooney. We find these talents and we bring them up, and then they surpass everything.
George got our star. Yeah, that's right.
So, well, let's talk about that, Gordon. Well, first, let me say thanks for being here. Go ahead.
Of course, I can't even. Well, there's a couple things I can't believe. I can't believe you hired me in the first place back in those days, because I had no idea what I was doing. But I did. I was smart enough to know the axiom of Hollywood, just to say yes and figure it out as you go. I knew that much, which is pretty much what I did. But the other thing is that I can't believe it's been as long as it has since we took that journey. I mean, I don't even want to think about how many years it's been, but
no, we're not going to count
that. The brand is persevering. That's for damn sure.
Amazing. Isn't it amazing?
It really is.
Let's talk about that. You were a student at Cal State Northridge when we hired you, and I can remember visiting you in the dorm, but I don't know how we ever got connected with you in the first place. How did that happen?
I was living off campus, actually, in a house, and I had like, I think, 2 or 3 roommates, and one of them was John DeBello's brother, Jerry, who was a clarinet player, and he brought it up at dinner, and dinner for us was hamburger helper or something, pretty modest, or ramen, stuff like that you eat when you're in college. Yeah. And so we're eating our ramen or whatever, and he goes, "Oh, by the way, my brother wanted me to ask if you wanted to score. He's got this movie. When do you want to do the music?" And I, of course, the answer was, of course. We didn't know who his brother was. We didn't know anything about the movie, but it was Paul Sunford who co-composed the score, and Jerry and I were the 3 guys that were renting the house. So Paul and I just dove in and said absolutely. And of course, Paul's also from San Diego, where the whole the production company was based. So I was just about to graduate from college, and man, at that point I thought, this is it, baby. Here I go. I'm not even out of school. The first film's on my doorstep. And but it was I learned so much from the whole. It was the first time I was ever in a recording studio. I remember the engineer that we hired was looking at me like, "Oh, this kid is in over his head." He was just and we hired. I knew a lot of good musicians. I knew horn players especially, but I didn't know a lot of good string players, and we had a modest string section, but we put them to work because we were writing kind of Star Wars kind of stuff, kind of action music with a lot of violinistic activity, and it's easy. That's just easier to do when you've got 40 string players. I think we might have had 10 or 12. So I remember the string players looking at me like, we hate you, at the recording session, because I remember they had to play a figure. Now, normally, now, in my wise years, I would give them a little break. I'd go, and then have somebody else go, and then I have them pick it back up. Those are tricks you learn because you're dealing with human beings who have to be able to make their muscles, operate the bow in a certain way. But I was so ignorant about that. And so anyway, so we just, Paul and I just dove in and figured it out. And I will remind you that this was the pre-VCR days.
Yes.
We didn't we saw the movie one time. I don't think you were there, but I think...
No, I wasn't at that screening.
I saw it with John. We went to Glen Sound in Hollywood. And I watched the movie a single time. And then after that, John gave me these notes of every scene. And basically, it was like tomato advances on woman. And then the music characteristic is terror. And then the next note is tomato gets closer to woman, more terror. And then tomato is almost upon women, incredible screaming terror. So that was and so from those notes, and he had timing. He had 6 seconds of this, and 5.5 seconds of this. So I just had to picture it in my head from what I remembered. And it's a miracle it even worked at all, frankly.
Well, it does work. So I forgot Jerry DeBello was a student there. He went on to, I think, play for the Air Force Band, actually.
That's right. That's right. He was a good little player. So
I appreciate the fact you said you didn't know what you're doing, because little did you know, none of us knew what we were doing.
Well, how did you get the movie funded? Where'd the money come from?
We went to friends and relatives, basically. It's a movie entirely funded by friends and relatives. And
my goodness.
Over time, various people have told us that we were unusual for a low-budget movie, because most people, they said, for low-budget movies, they tend to, the producers and director and so forth, take the money, and whatever's left, the investors get it. And we said we couldn't do that, because the investors were our family. We would have been killed if we did that. So we paid our investors back first. And then we got what was left.
Well, so how long did it take for the money to come in? I seem to remember that it was maybe 3 to 4 years, and all of a sudden a check showed up.
Oh, well, I don't know. So much of the movie was sold off to here and there and everywhere. Disney owned it for a while, and I can't remember the other companies that owned some piece of it for a while. And we have all the rights back now. One of the reasons we're looking at possibly another entry in the Killer Tomato series, because we now have the ability to use everything that we didn't have before, because everything finally came back to us. All those pieces get lost, but you're right. I got like 5 or 6 years ago, somebody from the Writers Guild found me somehow, I don't know how, and said, we're holding a residual check for you from European showings, and we're going to send you a check. And it's like, wow, how about that? I don't even belong to the Writers Guild. So you never know.
It's interesting, because some of the naivete that we had in those days, that I think informed our efforts, ironically, made the film appealing in its way. Like the kind of special effects that you used, and paper mache tomatoes or whatever it was, right. All that stuff, I think added to its charm in an interesting way. In the same way how the music, when I listen to it, it sounds like a little bit off, like, okay, there's somebody who knows what he's doing, but it's like something about it is wherever the strings a little bit out of tune, or the recording maybe not quite as pristine as it could be, or any of that stuff. When you take it as in its totality, that kind of makes it why it's appealing to people.
Yeah, it's like having your music done by John Williams' less credible nephew's cousins.
Well, I have to say, I totally ripped him off. I was like just aping Henry Mancini and John Williams, in the except for the jazz stuff. And I remember there was a car chase.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And I went with Lalo Schifrin's kind of thing. There was a movie, a Steve McQueen movie called Bullet.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
And it had a lot of a big car chase, and they used kind of big band jazz in that. So I go, okay, here's a precedent. I can use the big band, but I really wasn't. I didn't really have an identity, I guess, as a composer at that point, other than I loved big band jazz. That was kind of where I had lived since I was maybe 13.
Mm-hmm.
And so that informed a lot of it, but a lot of the movie, it worked. Like the song the soldiers are singing and they're doing a little dance number and kind of a bluesy little thing. I mean that was perfect, for that sensibility.
The tomato stomp. Yeah.
Tomato stomp, there it is, yeah.
Tomato stomp. Yeah, when I got after you lay down the tracks, that's when John and me sat down and wrote the lyrics for the songs that had lyrics, and it was actually pretty easy to do because I didn't find I had to strain too much to find lyrics that would fit within the music you'd written, which was nice. But you are right about the people often comment for such a low budget movie. The things they notice are that it looks good, and that's because we shot it on negative film, which was unusual for low-budget movies at that time. And we had an orchestra, as we put in the credits, the Four Square Symphony Orchestra, and which was pickup musicians in L.A. But the most of those budget movies at the time were chaka waka chum chum chaka chaka, two guys and a guitar and a drum,
right?
Or they were needle drop stuff, And the idea of having a fully orchestrated and composed soundtrack for a film of this budget, less than $100,000, was stunning. And those two things, I think, even as you said, it holds up. People who don't know why it holds up don't realize that's one of the reasons, is because it has interesting, orchestrated music that carries the scenes quite well. I particularly always like the scene at the end where they're charging up the ramp. The clarion call there, the triumphant sound of everybody victorious. So it's a great piece of music.
That's so fascinating.
That's great.
And I couldn't have sung it to you if my life depended upon it. But as you talk about it, it started to take formation in my head, and I remember feeling that same thing when you're scoring and when the music really sits and enhances what you see visually. It's a precious feeling, and when you get it right. Some people get it right all the time. Some of us, get it right some of the time. I remember that was a moment, right? Oh, this is lifting. The music's definitely lifting it up. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, nowadays, I can make that decision here in my studio. When I'm composing, I'm surrounded by computers and samplers and all that stuff. So I can do these mock-ups and I can feel the emotion and I can see that it's working. Whereas I was at my parents' house on the piano that I learned how to play when I was a kindergarten kid, upright piano. And I remember writing some music at that piano. And then my friends wanted to go to the Pudding Stone Lake in San Dimas.
Mhm.
I said, all right, I'll go with you guys. But I brought my score paper, and I'm sitting on a beach chair, and I'm orchestrating Killer Tomatoes at Pudding Stone Lake.
Uh-huh.
Because I go, well, I didn't want to give up my summer with my friends, but the connection that I can have with the picture now with this technology, I didn't have. I guess I could have rented a moviola, but I don't know if we didn't have the money to even do that.
No, we did not. We did not.
So I tell you what, I found, and I know we're not, it's not a video podcast, but I found this stopwatch. It's a Heuer old school stopwatch,
Uh-huh.
and this is what I used to
Wow.
to time out the cues at my piano.
Uh-huh.
And I remember I called a friend of mine whose name was Alf Clausen, who for about 23 years did the music on the Simpsons TV show. And I said, Alf, I don't know how do I figure out how to do the stopwatch? He goes, all right, here's what you do. And he gave me about maybe 6 bullet points of how to use the stopwatch in order to, hit my spots, and also to figure out the metronome, the BPM, because we needed to set a metronome, and so it was really old school, But
Yeah, I don't think we even used a scratch track. I mean,
no.
that would have been too sophisticated for us at the time.
Now, did you do the lyrics for what was the song that advertising guy sang in his office?
I wrote most of those lyrics. I kind of what's it?
It's like
I don't remember
Mind Maker or something.
Yeah,
like
Mind
that.
Maker, the Mind Maker song. That's what we call it. Yeah, and I'm sorry. Every time I hear it, Al Sklar is the guy who sang it. Oh, his voice is like screeching on a chalkboard to me. I just was not pleased the way that came out. It's a very sing-songy, silly kind of orchestration, but I think he didn't come out the way I was expecting it to when I heard the final recording. I said, that's not the way I heard it in my head.
It was a spirited performance.
Yes, it was. It also,
was funny.
The film stops dead at that point, and you do 3 minutes of song, then the film starts again.
It is pretty funny. Like, are we in a musical now? We are. We're doing Music Man all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. But some of the other songs, people love Tomato Stomp. They love Puberty Love. That's why people want a recording of it. I've been requested to provide it. I can't. And the love theme from Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which just that title alone is worth the price.
The title is all you need. Well, who was it that sang the lead vocal on Puberty Love?
Matt Cameron, who is now the drummer for Soundgarden and Pearl Jam.
Well, what a legacy he has then.
Yeah, he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So
how old was he when he did that? He must have been a kid.
Yeah, he was like, I don't know, 12 or 13, I think, or something.
Oh.
And I saw an interview with him about singing Puberty Love, because a lot of people don't realize it's him. Because in the film, he's credited as Foo, F-O-O, Foo Cameron, which is his nickname at the time. And who would have thought, same thing, that he would go on to be a famous musician. But sometimes you just get lucky, You and Paul became, Paul's a musician still, and you're a composer and musician and have your own band, and lots of people get a degree in music, and that's the end of that. They don't have a future in music.
All right, it's a rogue lottery win if you can carve out a career, and the business has been kind of on fragile ground for a long time, truthfully. And so you have to be versatile, and you have to be able to adapt. I mean, I adapted when I started writing music out of college, it was with a pencil and a piano and a piece of paper. And then all of a sudden I had to retool
Right.
and learn how to use a computer and learn how to, record and mix and edit, all separate disciplines on their own. People that I would hire people to do all those jobs. Now all of a sudden I'm doing all of it.
Wow.
And I used to feel resentful about it. Like in the 90s, I was working at Warner Brothers for Spielberg had these animation shows he did. Pinky and the Brain and Animaniacs and Sylvester and Tweety, all that kind of Warner Brothers style stuff.
Yep.
And I was one of about 6 composers doing those shows. It was great, We had a 40-piece orchestra. We were winning Emmys and getting money. It was so great. And then so that ended about 1999. And then in 2004, I think, they called me back to see if I could do this Tom and Jerry series. And I was excited to do that. But as I'm having my initial meeting, I'm realizing that all the money they spent in 1995 on 40 musicians and 2 music editors and 4 copyists and a recording engineer and all those people, all that money's gone, and they're paying me $10,000 to write one episode, per episode. But I have to do everything. I got to write the music. I have to orchestrate it. I have to record it. I have to mix it. I have to edit it. I'm doing all of those jobs. And I can tell you what, those 50, 60 people in 1995 earned a lot more than $10,000.
Yeah, of course. Right.
But the industry model had changed. And so here I am doing all those jobs. There's no way I can be as good of a recording engineer as a professional. Mm-hmm. But it turned out that it didn't really matter. It was television, as long as I got it, so it wasn't distorted, and they didn't care.
Yeah.
So that can be disillusioning, as and not all facets of the industry have slipped kind of in that regard. And of course, there's a lot of great television now, a bit of a resurgence when it comes to that. Although the money hasn't exactly rebounded as much as some of us would hope.
Right.
But over the arc of a career, it's really interesting to watch the ups and downs of how it goes. And I think about people that I knew in college that I thought, oh man, this guy's going to own this town. Mm-hmm. And then for whatever reason, just their own drive or whatever circumstances, they just went another way.
Wow.
And, it's to be a freelance musician, especially, try sitting across from a mortgage broker and you try to get a loan and you're telling him, well, I'm a musician, and you can see his eyes roll right then,
Yeah, exactly. I don't have any of your records.
I know. Well, exactly. So, but I've been one of the lucky ones for absolutely sure. Now, when I think about Paul, I mean, when I heard his music for the film, I thought his cues were better than mine in a couple of regards, because I thought that they called a little bit less attention to themselves than mine did. Mm-hmm. So the cue you mentioned, where they're charging, up the ramp at San Diego Stadium, and the music's heroic. Now that's a moment where it's okay for the music to be assertive and like a character in the movie. But there are other scenes where the music has to just be supportive. It kind of has to be wallpaper. It has to be subtextual. Right. And I hadn't really learned how to do that very well yet. But Paul, he had an instinctive understanding of it. He would write these, and they were interesting. They were kind of a little more dissonant, mysterious than mine, And I remember we ran out of time. There was a scene in a hotel room, and Steve is chasing heroin around the room or something. Right. And Paul, we didn't have time to record the cue. We just ran out of time. We had no more money. And Paul goes, we didn't get to record the cue where what's his name chases what's her name around the room, And I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. In those days, we couldn't even mock it up on a synthesizer. We just I don't know what you did, if you left the music out or if
it looks good. That scene's great.
Without music.
No, it has music.
So maybe they repurposed something else.
I guess so, because there is music in the scene and it works fine.
Well, there you go. You never know, right? But I remember how disappointed Paul was that he didn't get his cue done, and I don't blame him. I'm sure it would have been great. But
how? Let me ask you, how did that work then? Did you collaborate on the same song, or did you trade off who was going to do which scenes, or how did that work?
yeah, we went through the notes that John gave us, and he had it broken down, by scene, and then we kind of went and Paul, I think he did say, look, you'd be better at this than me. And so kind of the big band jazzy stuff I get and the action stuff I did. And he tended to do things that were a little more dialogue, heavy, and it just needed a little support. He did a lot of that stuff. And, but he was in San Diego. I was in LA, it wasn't like we were meeting every day. And I think I might've given him a theme that I wrote, I'm trying to reach back, man, and remember. But typically that's what I would do. I can't imagine I would say, well, here's a theme for this character. Use it if you want, if there's a place that you can use it. That's sometimes an effective thing to do. But well, as I say, we were far from professional, and we just met at the recording studio. I remember I got a lot of my friends, and we had to copy the parts out for the musicians. We didn't have money for a copyist, so we probably had 6 of us at my house 2 or 3 nights before the session, and we're all just copying music out, we barely made it to the downbeat. We were up all night, and little did I know that was not atypical. Much of the time,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
You're up all night before a session, to get things done.
It's amazing how much stuff, that you don't want the audience to know some things and how things get done. But lots of stuff is like, it looked like you spent many hours and you were brilliant to do this, and you're just looking, no, it's dumb luck.
It's true.
It just came out that way.
And
but I'll take the credit.
I know. What a genius I was.
Yeah, it reminds me at that time I was, or shortly after that, I was working at Channel 8 in San Diego, processing film and doing news film at night. And at the time we were in a 6 or 8 story building downtown, had one of those stairways where the studio was at the bottom and the editing was on the 6th or 7th floor. And we would come sometimes. The announcer would be queuing up the story to run, and we'd run over to the staircase, drop the film down the middle, 6 stories. Somebody would catch it and run it into the control room, and it would get queued up literally 3 seconds before the guy was saying, and here's the newsreel footage. It's like, that's as close as we get, before videotape. That was the nick of time. You had to glue film together. You just stick it together.
But you know what? Those analog days had an advantage, because what we noticed on the post-production side was, once video editing became a thing, then directors would be less and less hesitant, or be more hesitant to lock the picture, because they could always make a change. It's non-destructive. It's not like where if you have to edit, you're cutting,
right.
Cutting tape, right? Whereas now with digital, you go undo. Let's try this. Undo.
Exactly.
And so a lot of times, we'll get a scene to score, and then we have it all scored, and then we got a new edit here, and we send it, and then it might not be off by much. It might be off by 3 seconds here and a second and a half there, but you just have to go through and reverse engineer the music to make it fit.
Some sell, some buy, and only we know why. The rapper's more important than the prize. Important decisions are made each day, much too important for the plain folk to make. They're always in a bind, depend on us to help make up their mind.
I was going to say, I was thinking that the logical progression of that kind of thinking would be a film premieres, and like they do, previews for film now, and get audience engaged to their reaction to the ending or to a certain character. But now the film can be released, and they can go, I don't like that ending. Tweak it, send out a new copy to the theater, beam it over there.
Yep.
It's not a physical thing, and then the film can keep evolving and changing as long as you really want to do it. And
Which is amazing.
or where you have people that grew up on a life of playing video games and determining the outcome. Maybe you have a thing where the audience can say, well, I want this character to prevail, or I don't like that character. So, somehow the audience would be able to, tailor make the viewing experience to what they prefer. Part of me is horrified by that idea.
Right.
As an artist who, I really want to envision it from A to B to Z, and this is how I see it. This is my interpretation.
Sure.
But I see a lot of the industry going that way, particularly with the influence of video gaming.
Well, it is. It's so easy to edit digital now. There's just no comparison to film. What it was like doing film.
We did this movie, The Incredibles,
right?
And the director wanted it to be like a James Bond movie,
right?
So he wanted us to record to analog tape, 24-inch, And so we said, well,
Brad Bird? Was this Brad Bird?
Brad Bird, yeah. And so we said, okay. And so, we decided to run Pro Tools as a backup. But recording to tape is a whole different thing. And like if we want to punch in the middle of it, like if there's a few bars that just need to be corrected as opposed to playing the whole thing again, we can just kind of drop in on those 2 bars and get those right. But on tape, you hear the punch. You need to have some silence before you can punch in on the machine and record, a new segment. And then you have to have a little bit of silence on the back end to get out.
Right.
So it's a lot more complicated to do that kind of thing. And we found ourselves, and this was in 2004, when we were doing that film, and we were found ourselves feeling like we were back in the, late 80s or something, trying to deal with that older technology. Now, there's no doubt that analog stuff sounds really good. It's like interacts with the human body in a different way, than digital does. I definitely acknowledge that.
Well, the soundtrack to The Incredibles is one of my favorites. Every time I see it, it's just the music really carries that film, in my opinion. It just
Thank you.
It was the right kind of music.
Well, that was Brad Bird, who was not afraid to have the music be a personality along with the other characters in the film. He liked the fact. Whereas now, a lot of times, younger directors feel that music, if you could hear it or perceive it, like if you hear melodies, that it takes you out of the action. It takes you out of the story. Yeah. So they'd rather have music be, kind of tone painting, and just kind of sound designy, as opposed to like a John Williams kind of melody that you could hum and sing. It's just a matter of opinion, I suppose. But
why don't you talk a little bit about your band?
Yeah,
go ahead.
That happened. I was 40 years old when I decided to do it, and I was on stage conducting an orchestra at Warner Brothers, and I had an epiphany, and I remember thinking, Gordo, is this it for you? Because I would go to, Warner Brothers and I'd write what they would want me to write, know, and I'd go to Disney and I'd write what they would want me to write. And I thought, is this my life? It's a noble profession, but maybe I should plant my flag. And if I do, what is it? And I decided that maybe I had more road behind me than ahead of me at age 40. I wasn't, who knows, right? But so I went home that night and I wrote a piece for a big band. I went back to my 13-year-old self that fell in love with Count Basie Orchestra, and I wrote a piece like that. And I pretty much every night from 10 o'clock to about 1 a.m, and it was hard because I had young kids and I had to get up at 6 to get them to school, and then a long day of work on Animaniacs, whatever. But I just started to write that music again. And then 6 months later, I called a lot of my friends and we went in the studio and recorded it. And I still didn't want to lead a band. I didn't know that I had the energy to do it or that they would follow me. I really didn't know if they would, because all the friends they make a lot of money playing in studios. Could I get them to do a jazz gig?
Uh-huh.
I'd pay them like $50 or something, would they even do that?
Right.
And, but then I lucked into a record deal with a company and got a couple opportunities. So the first gig we ever did was at Cal State Northridge. I don't know how I think the jazz band director there asked if I wanted to come play and open for their band or something. And then I got on stage and I remembered that feeling of on stage where you play, the music goes out to the audience accepts it and then gives their enthusiasm back to you. And, that interchange that doesn't happen in a recording studio.
No, right. Totally different.
And so I remember thinking, that's it. That's why I started doing this. So, and so little by little, it started to become more of what I would spend my time with, and it brought balance into my life. It really was a one area where I could just write what I felt was appropriate. If I'm a composer for a film or for a project like that, I got to be a businessman, and if I have a director saying it needs to be this, my job is to go, you're absolutely right. Let's do that.
There you go.
Even if it offends me at my deepest level, I can't do it. I have to be smart about it. I have to be a
music
business
for hire. Well, that's what, when I was a kid, when you went to Disneyland, you could still see Count Basie and Vaughn Monroe and Duke Ellington and all these bands played there for free once you paid the $8 to get in. And that's where I got to like that kind of music because my mother introduced me to it, and it's like, hey, it's Duke Ellington. And now so many people don't get to hear big band kind of music. It's just not that, live. They don't get to hear it live with a band. So I think it is fantastic that the Big Fat Band is able to bring music, that kind of music, to so many people who might not have heard it before.
We played a gig at the Carnation Plaza Gardens. We did play there twice. And I'm up on that stage and I was just freaking out because I went to Disneyland every night in the summer to hear Basie and Buddy Rich and, Woody Herman and those bands. And I was just like, oh my God, I sat right there on the floor to watch these bands night after night. And and I told the audience, I said, you got to give me a minute because I am just flipping out that I went from sitting there to standing up here. And but I think you're so right that seeing is believing with this kind of music, because the difference between hearing music live and listening on your phone is night and day.
Absolutely.
You feel the air coming back at you, hit you in the chest.
Yes, there's a physical feeling of live music that's not the same. You're right. You can feel the vibration that's not the same coming out of a speaker.
Exactly right. And that's what gives us hope, because a lot of our demographic for this band has always been high school kids.
Really?
Middle school, high school, and college kids that are playing this music. They're band geeks. That's who they are. But they're playing this music, and they're living this music. And I think the value of it goes beyond that we need more jazz musicians, or we need more jazz fans. I think it goes deeper. I think that your understanding of music, of content, like jazz and classical music and film music, some forms, leads to more empathy as a human being.
Oh.
And that's what we need more than anything in our world today. We need to have empathy, and we need to have ability to kind of see the gray area in life and look between the lines. And I think music helps give you that perception. That's why I think that the best things that we do at the Fat Band is when we go and do our outreach and play concerts for young people. was a kid, the first time I heard an orchestra was on a Bugs Bunny cartoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids will say, "Oh, I first heard this jazz on The Incredibles," or maybe in Seth MacFarlane's work where he emphasizes the Great American Songbook,
Mm-hmm.
and people like that. Johnny Carson was that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Who kept a big band on the Tonight Show long after NBC wanted to cancel it, and he's like, "You want me? You got to take them too."
Yeah.
And so a big band was on network TV every night for how long was he on that show?
Oh, wow. I mean, I saw Doc Severinsen's band once live. Yeah, they were amazing. Yeah, I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna try to make it up to Thousand Oaks. I don't know if I can, but I'm gonna try to make it up to that show if I can.
Oh man, well we're hoping to get down to San Diego and play. We played there last year. I think at San Diego Community College. Is that it? But I have my radio show on KSDS, which is based in San Diego, and I do that every week. And that's also been a rejuvenating thing for me because it reminds me of my college days when we would go to Tower Records every Friday and we'd buy, 10 albums and go home and just, absorb them. And then as you get older, you just kind of, I got my music, I got music I like, or I'm too busy. Whereas now with this radio show, I proactively seek out, the young guys and try to find, music that I haven't heard before. And it's really been invigorating for me, for my own creative, output, to hear these new sounds and rejuvenate kind of what my intentions are.
Nice. It's nice. Well, I appreciate you having you on the show or on the podcast here, Gordon. Anything else you want to add before we?
The only thing I would say is that if we can do another one, you got to get Clooney. There's no way.
He doesn't. Somehow he's never invited me once to his villa in Italy. I don't know what.
Oh man, well, he probably lost your contact info. I'm sure
that must be
it. Well, he might be at the stage of his life where he might want to revisit, the early days.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I see a lot of big stars doing TV commercials. They must need some money. I mean, he does TV commercials. What am I saying? So
I think he's been known to do a couple.
Yeah.
There are worse people in this town than George, that's for sure. But
that's true. People often ask me, because if you search George Clooney and Killer Tomatoes, the photo that pops up in your Google search is the scene with George and me in the pizza place, and they'll ask me, what was George like? And you know what? He is a nice guy. He really was. I liked working with him. I learned a lot from him.
It does kind of piss you off when a guy like that, he's just so handsome.
I know,
man.
That's what I tell people is that about my career. Is I said I should have taken the advice George gave me, which was be taller and more handsome. And I didn't do either one.
That's all you needed to do. I don't know why you didn't listen.
I really should have worked at that.
Acosta, thanks for having me on, man. I just can't thank you enough. Also for taking a flyer on Paul and I when we were young and naive but it was unforgettable experience for me, and I don't run into very many people that don't bring it up.
Well, that's great.
As part of
and you got a Grammy nomination for orchestrating the theme song, which John
did. I know. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was nice. Didn't win, but that's probably somebody paid off the Academy to vote for something.
Exactly, payola, baby. We actually have the Grammys are in a few weeks from the time as we speak here, and I have 3 nominations for.
Oh, great!
Yeah, so. I you know what? I got this publicist, and I'm this interview came actually a good time, but I'm doing all these interviews, and then she's got me on Friday. I'm going to this gift suite, and it's she goes, it's like an Emmy nominee gift suite for influencers and reality stars and athletes. I go, well, why am I going to it?
Yeah,
I go, I don't have an Emmy nomination. She goes, no, I cleared it with the people that run it. They're friends of mine. So you go to this thing and they give you stuff. I go, they give me stuff? I go, yeah, it's like they just give you all kinds of stuff.
That's what I heard. I mean, I've not been invited to any of those either. So,
I'll let you know how it goes. I guess I'm going to go get some stuff.
Get some stuff, right? That's the only reason I'm going is like, get some stuff. Well, thank you to Gordon Goodwin for being on the podcast this week. We'll be back with another guest in the future. I hope you will stay tuned and listen to the next Attack of the Killer Tomato podcast. This is Custer Dillon, your host.
Thanks for listening to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Be sure to follow and subscribe whenever you listen to your podcasts. To read the blog associated with this episode, visit olismedia.com. This episode was produced in studios located in San Diego, California, and Tijuana, Baja California. Creative Director Ulises Bretog. Sound Engineer Alan Glazepar. Ina Alvarez is co-producer. Serving as executive producer and co-founder is J.C. Polk. And Chad Pease is president and co-founder. Olis Media is an IVC media company.
Olis Media.